coolest dictator in the world completely 180'd the murder capital of the world into the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. All with the budget of a tiny, impoverished Central American country. First order of business, classify all gang members as terrorists, double the army and redirect them to go arrest all gang members in the country, build the largest prison in Latin America, and declared war on the gangs. This is El Salvador. Just a couple years ago, the most dangerous country in the world. And with that title, you already know the gangs fought back. In 3 days, these gangs deleted 87 people in declaration of, we the gangs run this country, not you. Bro, president stood on business. Then this is when the president declares a state of emergency in the country and gets special power to basically lock up anybody that looks like a gang member. Then goes on national TV and says, I heard there's rumors that you guys want to retaliate back some more. I swear and promise to God, if there is civil disorder, your homeboys in prison will not see one grain of rice for the rest of their lives. He's at war with the murder capital of the world. Bro stands on business. And in less than 2 years, El Salvador goes from the most dangerous country on earth to the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. A lot of human rights organizations were giving the president shit because some might say they were treating the gang members too harshly.
What about the human right of a woman not to be raped? What about the human right of kids to play or to be free or to go to the park? Or the human right to walk in the street? What about the human right to live? But no, they were worried about the human rights of the killers.
Seeing the insane transformation that this tiny, impoverished Central American country was able to do with their tiny budget made me wonder, what the fuck are the American politicians doing here with the budget of the richest country in the world? And it made me ask myself a question that I'll bounce back onto you. Is the person I'm voting for genuinely going to make a difference in improving the lives of the people in our country? Or are they just talking out their ass for votes? Stay curious.
That is awesome for El Salvador. That won't work in America. It just simply won't work. And I'm going to qualify this by saying that as a person who worked in a military unit that participated in nation building, where we would go in and help nations that have been defunct, and then we're going to help them rebuild their nation or build their nation, one of the things that I realized really quickly is that what you do in one country doesn't necessarily work in another country, whether it's because of cultural reasons, whether because of their history and other political systems that are in place. But for the most part, what you do in one country doesn't necessarily work in another country, so it doesn't necessarily, you can't copy and paste it. Now, one of the problems that did happen in El Salvador that he didn't mention, though, is that since Afro-El Salvadorians are only 4% of the population, but they are, as in most Western countries, disproportionately impoverished, disproportionately uneducated, disproportionately unemployed, and disproportionately imprisoned. A situation like that is going to make whatever the disproportionate group, it's going to put them in a worse situation. Because if you don't attack the issue of poverty first, then all you're doing is you're going to group in other people who are disenfranchised simply because they were born into a group of people or a family that was impoverished. So if you really consider why do people join gangs? Most of the time, someone joins a gang because they grew up in an impoverished environment and they were looking for a way out. And that seems to be the only way that they can get out, or they got roped into that. Education wasn't a pathway. Business structure wasn't a pathway. Employment wasn't a pathway. So it's it can be very alluring to someone who has tried the normal ways, but then find themselves caught up in the game. And when you do something like that, if you did that in America, you will increase the disproportionate number of blacks and Latinos and poor whites and into the prison system, and you're going to make your country more polarized than it already is. Now in El Salvador, which is with such a smaller population and with not as much diversity as we have here in America, you're going, and not that they don't have diversity, they have it, but it's not as significant. You try to do that, something like that in America, what you're going to find is that you're going to create more racial issues within this country. Now, do I think that there's something that can be done in a similar fashion? Yes, but it has to be more targeted. But before you do that, you also have to first try to get a balanced scale. And that takes at least a generation. It takes at least a generation of America changing its policies on education, changing its policy on trade schools, changing its policy on hiring practices and things of that nature, because you have to at least take a generation to give people an opportunity at a fair opportunity to change their lives differently from the gangs. And then you go and you snatch up the ones who just simply choose to be in a gang because that's just their decision. They don't want to take the harder road, which is to get your education, to be gainfully employed and utilize the economic system that's in place for you to be able to raise yourself and your family out of an impoverished situation. You need a strong middle class before you do something like that in America. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself creating a situation where you just polarize your communities to the point where people now are fighting in the streets and people are protesting, and you're going to create more problems than you actually solve in America for something with a program like that. So even though it's great for El Salvador, that is not a good program for America. Unfortunately, our politicians today, whether we're talking about the Republicans or the Democrats or anybody else, are so focused on getting votes and getting in power and taking care of their friends, and that they can care less. It's funny to me that so many people vote for these presidents and Congress people and senators, and yet hardly ever receive the benefits to which they campaigned on, because our politicians just talking out of their asses and don't want to do any real work that it would require to make this country better. I'd rather vote for the guy that I keep seeing on TikTok who keeps saying, "'Cause I'm running for shit." But El Salvador, kudos. Even though you made some people's lives worse who did not necessarily have an opportunity, it's not my country. So I can't tell you what to do in it. But I do believe in real prison and real punishment for prisoners. American prisons are soft. I had to escort a guy, an American military personnel to a Turkish prison because he had broke their laws, and we didn't have a SOFA agreement at the time. And so he was punishable to their laws. And that Turkish prison was a real prison. Not these televisions and internet and cell phones and cooked meals prisons that we have here in America with yards with basketball courts and all this sort of thing. We got bullshit prison. But hey, y'all have a great day. Think about it. I really would like to hear your comments on it. And always remember that you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.